September 7, 1940, 4:43 in the afternoon. Across London, the air raid sirens begin their wailing rise and fall. People stop mid-step, mid-sentence. Dockers on the Thames look up from bales and crates. The eastern sky is darkening, not with cloud with aircraft. Row upon row, tight as stitching, the sun flashing along their wings. This is how the Blitz begins. In 1 hour, London's docks will be a string of furnaces. By nightfall, the river itself will carry fire. And before dawn, a second lesson will settle over the city. Terror can break things, but it can also make a people unbreakable. The formation crosses the coast in waves 348. German bombers escorted by 617 fighters sweeping inland toward the industrial arteries of the capital. For weeks, the Luftwaffe has been hammering RAF airfields, sector stations, and radar masts, trying to smash the shield of fighter command and open the way for invasion. It is working. Squadrons are being flung into the air with barely any rest between sorties. Ground crews are welding and riveting under bombardment. Airfields like Biggin Hill, Kenley, and Tangmere are cratered, towers shattered, maintenance bays in ruins. One more week at this pace, 2 at most, and the balance in the skies might tilt. Then, on the night of August 24th, a German navigation error drops bombs on London. The next evening, RAF bombers fly to Berlin. The damage is small. The symbolism is not. Adolf Hitler had promised his people that enemy bombers would never reach their capital. Now they have. In the Berlin Sportpalast on September 4th, he promises to erase British cities. Hermann Göring, eager to deliver a dramatic blow and to draw out the RAF's remaining strength over the capital, sees an opportunity. Shift the target from fighter command to London. Crush morale, force Churchill to negotiate. If the fighters rise to defend the city, break them in one decisive battle. It is a catastrophic miscalculation, but neither man knows it yet. The first sirens in London sound just after 4:30. In offices and shops, people reach for gas masks and bundle children toward shelters. Anti-aircraft guns lift their muzzles. Barrage balloons tug at their cables over the river. On the roofs, the air raid precautions wardens whistle people off the streets. On the radio, the calm voice of the announcer. Air raid warning, red. At Fighter Command's headquarters, the Dowding system, the give and take of radar plots and observer corps calls flowing into filter rooms, out to group and sector starts to hum at its highest pitch. On the big map table at Uxbridge, tiny wooden blocks march across the channel. Chalk pencils squeak. Phones buzz. Chain home radar has painted the incoming raid early. Now 11 Group's Air Vice Marshal, Keith Park, lifts the phone and begins to scramble squadrons. Hornchurch up, North Weald up. Kenley up. The controllers speak in clipped code. Pilots sprint. Engines cough and roar. Spitfires and Hurricanes lift off and climb hard, turning toward the threat, knowing they are outnumbered, knowing they cannot be everywhere at once. Just before 5, the first bombs fall on the East End. At the Surrey Commercial Docks and the Royal Docks, at Millwall and Poplar and Bermondsey, the cranes and warehouses become tinder. A stick of bombs finds an oil tank. It blossoms, ruptures, and pours its burning cargo into the river, where the Thames carries flame like a new kind of current. Warehouses of rubber and timber turn into kilns. The smell of hot tar and cordite, of splintered pine and old rope, settles over the water. In the terraced streets of Stepney and West Ham, families hear the descending whistle, the flat slap thump of impact, and then the impossible noise of buildings slumping into themselves. A boy is knocked off his feet by a blast 2 streets over. He stands blinking in dust to see a neighbor sitting upright on a stoop, her hands still tangled in her knitting, the entire front of her house gone as clean as if a knife had sliced it. She wobbles, and gravity remembers her. Fire engines clatter through drifts of glass. Rescue parties with stretchers and spades thread alleys that have become canyons of brick. An ARP warden paints unexploded bomb in wax pencil on a wall and whistles people away. The auxiliary fire service forms bucket chains when the mains fail. Water hisses on hot stone, steam rolls, ash settles in flakes as soft as snow. Out in Buckinghamshire, at Chequers, Winston Churchill hears the sirens in his mind as soon as the call reaches him. He orders the car. The journey back to London is a progression through stages of damage. Broken windows, collapsed shop fronts, streets whose names have just become statistics. John Jock Colville, his private secretary, watches from the opposite seat. Churchill's jaw is set. He grips his stick so hard the skin stretches white across his knuckles. They pass a shelter being dug out, shovels moving in a heartbeat rhythm. At the lip of the hole, a body wrapped in a sheet. Colville sees the Prime Minister's eyes fill. He will record that later in his diary because it tells the truth. Defiance and grief do not cancel each other. They often arrive linked. When Churchill steps out on Downing Street, the cameras pop and the murmurs rise. He turns toward the waiting officials with a look that is part challenge, part promise. He asks for the latest reports. He wants to know which sectors are burning, how many engines are still pumping, which rail lines are severed, whether the docks can still shift cargo by morning. He knows something Hitler has just made true. By switching targets from airfields to cities, the Luftwaffe has given fighter command what it cannot buy time. Airfields can be patched without bombers circling overhead. Pilots can sleep. Reserves can be shuffled. Planes can be ferried up from the Midlands. Time is the currency of survival. The rate does not stop with evening. The last daylight stragglers turn for home, and then the night wave arrives. Bomb doors open in the dark. Incendiaries fall like thrown coins, tink-tink on brick and slate. They flare and crawl and bite. High explosives follow, punching holes where the fire takes its breath and then roars. Sirens keep time. As searchlights write white geometry across the sky. Over batteries of anti-aircraft guns, the trails of shells climb, red beads that vanish into the night. In tunnels beneath the city, the underground becomes a temporary commons. Families gather under station names that feel suddenly like Promise's angel. Temple, hope on the chalkboard for tomorrow's schedule, no one will keep. It is not yet official policy to shelter on the platforms, but no one has the time or the will to enforce rules against survival. Blankets are unrolled. Babies are rocked to sleep under enamel signs. Tea appears. Someone sings because singing makes time behave. Up above, in the rough geometry of a colonnade shadow, a home guard volunteer and an ARP warden lean on their shovels and make a pact to meet in the morning. Neither is certain the other will keep it. A dog refuses to leave a collapsed doorway and has to be carried like a prize. An ambulance driver drops off 2 living, goes back for 3 more, and comes back with 1. Beneath a torn wall, a cupboard swings open and a blue dress flutters in a wind that was not there a moment before and will not be there a moment after. Dawn creeps into a sky imprinted with smoke. The east end glows the color of a bruised peach. In the ledger that matters, approximately 430 Londoners are dead and more than 1,600 are seriously injured. In other ledgers, more impersonal but not less real, the docks are cratered, ships warped by heat, cranes twisted like toys. Yet the docks will move cargo that day. The railway will run trains. Postmen will make their rounds. Bread will be sold in buildings that have no windows and sometimes no walls. The city decides, collectively and without ceremony, that it will be itself. Churchill is in the East End that morning, and again on the 9th. Word spreads down streets whose houses tilt toward one another like men in conversation. The Prime Minister is here. A crowd gathers, gray with dust and stiff with fatigue. He climbs onto a heap of bricks and rubble, hat tipped back, cigar jammed into the corner of his mouth. An elderly woman, her hair in pins, cups her hands to her mouth. "We can take it, Mr. Churchill, give it back to them." It is not a line anyone writes for him. It is a command. He lifts a hand in the V forefinger and middle finger separated, not yet a universal symbol but already a promise. "You are the heroes," he calls down. "You will win this war." A man in a flat cap answers with a cheer watery at the edges. Another laughs the laugh that is really a sob toughening itself. That night, when the door closes on the cabinet war rooms, the Defiance tilts and Churchill's shoulders tilt with it. General Hastings Ismay finds him with casualty sheets and telegrams spread like a paper city across the desk. "The spirit is there," Churchill says, not looking up. But how long can flesh and blood endure? It is not a rhetorical question. It is the one Hitler is betting on. On September 11th, Churchill turns on the microphone. His voice goes out into tunnels and kitchens and fire stations, into places where air, tastes of smoke and tea, into rooms where glass crunches underfoot, into backs of trucks, where men close their eyes for 60 seconds that feel, blessedly, like 60 minutes. These cruel, wanton, indiscriminate bombings of London are, of course, a part of Hitler's invasion plans, he says, conversational at first, as if narrating fog. He hopes by killing large numbers of civilians and women and children that he will terrorize and cow the people of this mighty imperial city. He pauses, and the pause does the work words cannot. Little does he know the spirit of the British nation or the tough fiber of the Londoners, bred to value freedom far above their lives. He does not promise safety. He does not pretend the worst is over. He offers something else, acknowledgement and defiance. Yes, this is terrible. Yes, people are dying. Yes, your home may be next. We will endure it anyway. We will survive it. We will win. While London burns, a quieter battle continues along the coast and inland across the South. Controllers talking young men into the right sky at the right moment. Sector stations repairing what yesterday was smashed. Pilots snatching sleep fully clothed. Mechanics bleeding knuckles on cowlings. The Dowding system, the interlocking of radar, observers, plotting. Communication proves harder to defeat than even the Germans imagined. The RAF does not have to meet every raid with equal strength. It can choose. When the Luftwaffe switches from attacking airfields to attacking the city, fighter command breathes enough to steady itself. On September 15th, Churchill goes to the bunker at Uxbridge to watch. On the map table, counters march. Raid forming over Calais. Raid forming over Cap Gris-Nez. The operators are so young they still look like students. Serious because seriousness is the only stance left. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park leans over Churchill's shoulder. "We're putting everything up," he says in a voice held tight. Every squadron. This is it. The Prime Minister watches and says nothing. In the space between one phone call and the next, he grows older. Raids are intercepted over the Thames estuary and the suburbs. Formations break. Bombers jettison their loads early. Fighters press. The tally sheets later will show that the Luftwaffe lost scores of aircraft that day. The RAF lost fewer and, crucially, most of the pilots survived to fly again. When Churchill turns to leave, he is not performing when he says, "Don't speak to me. I've never been so moved." 2 days later, on September 17th, Hitler postpones Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion barges massed in Channel ports will never cross. The Luftwaffe has failed to break fighter command. The skies over England will remain contested, but not lost, and yet the nights continue. For 57 consecutive nights starting September 7th, London is bombed. The pattern becomes so familiar it becomes a kind of timekeeping. The sirens begin to sound. Families gather children and a few irreplaceable things, a photograph, a clock, a book, a teapot, objects that anchor a life. Doors are locked, then unlocked as someone remembers the cat. In the underground, chalk marks on walls organize the disorder. Tea at 10. Nurses this way. Shelter full. A violin plays something cheerful on a platform. People laugh with a bitterness that also tastes like courage. Quilts spread. Someone kneads dough on a suitcase. The smell of damp wool and iron dust, the scrape of a spoon, the muffled, steadily recurring thump of detonations from above, these become the soundtrack of a city that has decided to live in layers. On the surface, heroism is repetitive, and therefore invisible until you look closely. Firefighters haul hoses over heaps of brick that used to be streets. They work until their arms tremble, and then work some more. The AF's, the Auxiliary Fire Service, arrives in lorries, whose paint is still crisp because the men are new to this particular hell. A warden's notebook fills with addresses that will be rubble by morning. A policeman in a helmet, white with dust, carries a child asleep on his shoulder, as if sleep were something you could protect by holding still. The randomness of survival cuts in every direction. On October 14th at Balham, a high explosive bomb hits the road above the underground station. The crater swallows a bus. Water and debris crash into the tunnels and pour down the stairwell, dragging people with it. 68 die in a shelter that had felt safe until a minute before. On other nights, a theater takes a direct hit. On another, a similar theater with the same number of people in it remains untouched. The mind tries to find patterns where there are none because patterns feel like control. Churchill keeps showing up. His presence is a ritual that says the government is not just an address. It is a person willing to stand where the danger is. He walks blackened streets while bricks are still cooling, his hat set just so, his cigar a flag. Children shout, "Good old Winnie!" and run alongside the car until their mothers catch up and drag them back, scolding and smiling at the same time. He kneels to speak to a woman sitting on a doorstep of a house that has only 2 walls left, and asks her name as if names were a kind of repair. He weeps openly sometimes, he rages other times. His doctor, Lord Moran, notes how the sleeplessness grips him after such visits, how he sits up with cigars and brandy, dictation and silence, trying to keep the worst images at bay. Colville writes in his diary that the Prime Minister seems older at breakfast than he did at dinner. None of this weakness makes him weaker in public. It makes his public strength believable. In Parliament on October 8th, he says, "Death and sorrow will be the companions of our journey. Hardship our garment. Constancy and valor our only shield. We must be united, we must be undaunted. We must be inflexible." The words could be dismissed as rhetoric. They are not, because the man speaking them spent last night under the same sky as the people who will hear them quoted in the morning paper, because he spent the afternoon in the East End tasting ash. He does not say, "It will be easy." He says, "It will be endured." As autumn tips toward winter, the Luftwaffe adjusts tactics. If blast cannot break London, perhaps fire can. Incendiaries small, magnesium, bright as new stars when they land become common. A black and white photograph from December 29, 1940, will later appear in newspapers across the world. St. Paul's Cathedral, dome luminous through smoke, the city around it a field of flame. That night will be called the Second Great Fire of London. The medieval Guildhall is gutted. 8 churches designed by Christopher Wren are destroyed in a few hours. St. Paul's survives because of a small stubborn band of watchers who climb the roof with sand and shovels, stamping out incendiaries with the determination of men who have decided that if this is a temple, then their labor is a prayer. On a government rooftop, Churchill refuses a suggestion that he go below. "This is my city," he says. "I will watch it burn if I must." He watches, and in the morning the city is still there, not whole, not unharmed, but present. Fire engines stand in puddles where old streets have melted into new shapes. Smoke turns morning light into amber. Somewhere, a shopkeeper props a door against a wall that no longer encloses anything and hangs a sign that says, "Open as usual." Courage takes as many forms as fear. A teenage girl in service writes to her mother in the countryside that she will not be sent away. Her employer needs her, and anyway she knows the drill at the shelter now, and the teacups never break because of how she stacks them. A mass observation diarist in Holborn reports that neighbors share the contents of refrigerators when the electricity fails. And I have never tasted so many kinds of jam. A man who keeps pigeons feeds them even when he is hungry because, he explains, "They are mine." A teacher chalks arithmetic on a board leaned against the wall of a classroom with no roof and conducts a lesson under open sky. The word normal stretches to include impossible things and then does not snap. In the air, the young men the Prime Minister called the few weeks earlier on August 20th. In words already fixed in the language keep flying. Hurricanes nail bombers, Spitfires tangle with escorts. The big wing controversy between 12 Groups Trafford Lee, Mallory and 11 Groups Park simmers in the background. Should fighters go up in large combined formations or in smaller, faster packets? Historians will argue the merits and the costs. Pilots will remember the way the harness bites into the shoulders when you pull G, the smell of burning glycol when fire takes a Merlin, the way a wingman's voice can steady your hands more than any instruction in a manual. On the ground, the machine keeps turning. The Dowding system does not break. Radar masts send out blades of radio energy and receive echoes that a human mind can arrange into warning. The observer cores, bins and notebooks and trained eyes spot dots in the sky and convert them into planes and vectors. Filter rooms remove clutter and keep meaning. Controllers move wooden blocks on tables using croupiers' rakes and speak coordinates into microphones without raising their voices. In workshops, a man hammers a piece of bent aluminum into a curve that will be a wing edge, and he does it with the precise pressure passed to him by a foreman who used to make car fenders. This is what home front means when slogans are stripped away. By the time the first phase of the Blitz ends in May 1941, when Hitler's attention tilts decisively east toward the Soviet Union, more than 43,000 British civilians will have been killed, over 1 million homes damaged or destroyed. London will be pocked and scorched, Coventry a scar of twisted steel and melted stone, Liverpool battered to its docks. The Blitz will not have achieved what it promised. Britain will not have surrendered. Fighter command will not have been destroyed. The government will not have been toppled. The phrase, "London can take it," the title of an American newsreel narrated by Quentin Reynolds that autumn, will have traveled the world because it names something the bombers proved without meaning to. Terror can temper as well as shatter. When Churchill later writes about these months, he will call the Blitz a test not of armies but of a nation's character. He will be right. But what matters in the moment is not analysis. It is choice. On September 7, 1940, at 4:43 in the afternoon, a city begins to make a choice that it will keep making for months. It chooses to gather in the underground and turn platforms into neighborhoods. It chooses to climb ladders into smoke and tamp glowing metal with sand. It chooses to shake glass from blankets and sleep anyway. It chooses to mourn openly and go to work in the morning. It chooses to form a queue where a shop's wall used to be. It chooses to elect a man to embody its defiance, and that man chooses to deserve it by standing where the danger is and by speaking truth without flinching. In a sense, Hitler's greatest gift to Churchill, the strange alchemy of hate transmuted into advantage, is time. Time for pilots to rest and train, for aircraft to be built and repaired, for the Royal Navy to knit itself tighter, for merchantmen to form convoys, for Americans to be impressed by a people who do not break, and to send help more freely. In February 1941, Churchill speaks to the United States across the Atlantic. "We shall not fail or falter. We shall not weaken or tire. Give us the tools and we will finish the job." The tools arrive in fits and starts: aircraft, guns, food by convoy, hope by wireless. But before the crates and the crates within the crates can be counted, something else has arrived, and it matters more. Certainty about what kind of people live on this island, certainty paid for in smoke and grit and the names of streets. If you want to understand that certainty in a single image, set aside the newsreel and the speeches, and look instead at the photograph of a woman sweeping. The building behind her is a sectioned dollhouse rooms, open to the air, wallpaper peeling, a mirror reflecting a sky without a ceiling. She stands on a doorstep that leads nowhere and sweeps glass into neat piles. Order against chaos. Habit against terror. It is not a grand gesture, it is a daily one. It is therefore more powerful. On the evening of September 7th itself, there is one more scene you should hold as the credits roll in your mind. In the control room at Uxbridge, the last markers have been slid off the table. The operators are drinking tea gone cold. Someone yawns and tries not to. A telephone rings and is answered, and the voice on the other end asks for numbers. The numbers are given in the calm that comes after a storm that is not, in fact, over. Above ground, in the smoking dark, two men in rough coats walk side by side down a street that used to feel shorter. They make the pact they made last night and will make tomorrow. See you in the morning. They do not shake on it, they nod. It is enough. September 7th, 1940, 4:43 in the afternoon. Sirens. Engines. A city looking up. An empire measured by something other than acreage and tonnage. Fire comes. And London, stubborn, battered, ancient as the river that runs through it, sets its jaw and says, without needing to shout, "Do your worst. We can take it."